If you look at what the Muslims are going through right now, the hardship the Muslims are going through right now in Gaza, that there's a blockade on them for years, and now even worse, that they have no electricity, they have no water, the essentials, they do not have access to it. Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala, these people that have been suffering for all these years, and now they're suffering even more, and now they're being bombed from above them, and they're being attacked from every side, and now Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala, these people that are there, they are chosen individuals. They are people that Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala has chosen, because Allahu Tabarak wa Ta'ala, when He tests an individual, He tests them with a test that they can bear. Because the Prophet ﷺ, it tells us, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَا ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلِ ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلِ ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلِ. Those who are tested the most are the prophets, and then those who follow them in faith, and those who follow them in faith, and those who follow them in faith. The question that I ask myself, it is, what secret do these people of Gaza, do they have with Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, that Allah Jalla fi'ula has chosen them for such a great honorable cause? What is it that they have between them, Allah Azza wa Jal, that Allah Tabarak istafahum, He's chosen them? But not only that, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He does not test anyone to the extent that it will lead to them losing faith. Because the test depends on the amount of iman that you have. I'm sure all of us, we saw that father whose children were martyred, and then someone was crying next to him, and he says, ليش تعيط؟ ليش تبكي? Why are you crying? كلنا شهداء. We are all martyrs. ثبات. That is iman that does that. Iman is what makes an individual that firm. Faith and conviction in the promise of Allah and the reward of Allah, for their patience, for their steadfastness, for them being firm in what Allah Tabarak has commanded to do so. That is what keeps them going. Nothing else does that except iman. When an individual has that iman and he is strong like that, Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala promises to grant the victory. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Verily Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He defends those who believe, who have that iman. When I'm actually making that dua, is there a certain format that I should follow, that I have been taught? Yes. First of all, there are certain things that if I do it, it makes my dua even more accepted, that the Prophet ﷺ recommended. What are those things? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that one of the things that makes your dua more accepted, which is recommended to do when you make that dua, it is that you face the Qibla, if you can. It's not a must to face the Qibla. طيب, is that it? No. I need to have sincerity. It's an act of worship. I need to have sincerity. Without sincerity, it won't be accepted at all. It's an act of worship. That's number 2. Also, I need to raise my hands. It makes your dua more accepted. Now listen to this hadith. Every time I hear it, or I read it, or I come across it, it makes me feel extremely shy. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, إن الله حيي كريم يستحي من العبد إذا رفع يديه أن يردهما صفرا خائبتين. Allah, verily Allah is hayy, extremely shy in a way that's befitting to His Majesty. Kareemun, extremely generous. He becomes shy of his slave when he raises his hands to him to return his hands empty. Allah becomes shy of me? Who am I for Allah to become shy of me in a way that's befitting to His Majesty Jalla fi'ula? After hearing that, how can I ever think, and ever I raise my hands to Allah and say, Ya Allah, that I'm not going to get a response? How can I ever think that? Dua is an important matter, and it's something that sometimes we overlook. We think that it's not the solution to our problems, but sometimes it's a solution to all our problems, because our affairs are all in the hands of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. The moment I ask Allah for His help, Allah Jalla fi'ula will help you, because there's a lack of certainty in the dua that people they make sometimes. Some people they make dua with the mentality that I'm just going to give it a go. Let's see how it goes. If you do that, you won't get anything, because that's extremely disrespectful to Allah. What do I mean by that? Allah, who never breaks a promise, tells you, ask me, I will give you a response. And then you say, I'm going to ask, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get a response. That's extremely disrespectful to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Udu'u Allah wa antum muqinuna bil ijaba. Call upon Allah whilst you are certain 100% that you're going to get a response. But then he also said ﷺ, Inna Allah la yaqbalu du'a qalbin ghafin lahin. That Allah does not accept the dua of a heart that is absent. You know, sometimes people they make dua and they're just saying words and it's not coming from their heart. You're just uttering words. They're heedless, they're distracted by other things, they're thinking about other things, they don't mean it. If you make dua like that, Allah won't accept it. Your heart has to be present, your mind has to be present, you have to mean it. It's impossible, almost impossible that Allah, you raise your hands to Him, that He will not give you what you've asked for. SubhanAllah. But there's an incident that refers to this exact matter we're talking about, depression. Did depression exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Was it recognized? Yes, it was. Was something done about it? Was it acknowledged? Was it addressed? Yes, it was. One day the Prophet ﷺ, he came into the masjid. He saw a Sahabi known as Abu Umama radiallahu anhu sitting in the masjid by himself. It wasn't a time of salah, so the Prophet ﷺ was intrigued. He asked him, Ya Abu Umama, why are you in the masjid? And it's not the time of salah. Normally people will be at work, they will be doing stuff. But why are you here? What's brought you here? He asked him. So Abu Umama said, Ya Rasulullah, I have been overwhelmed with debt. And due to that, I'm feeling extreme grief or perhaps depression and anxiety, he said. So the Prophet ﷺ, he sat with him and he comforted him and he consoled him. And then he gave him a prescription. He said to him, Ya Abu Umama, I'll give you a prescription. If you do it the way I tell you, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will get rid of your debts, He will pay off your debts for you and get rid of your grief and your depression and your anxiety and so on. So Abu Umama said, what is it, Ya Rasulullah? He wants to know, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he told him every single morning to say this specific dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wal-ajzi wal-kasal wal-bukhli wal-jubn wa ghalabati ad-dayn wa qahri al-rijal. To say, Allahumma ya Allah, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you and your protection from al-ham. Al-ham, it is anxiety. Wal-hazan. Al-hazan, it is extreme grief or depression. Wal-ajzi wal-kasal. Al-ajz, it is being incapable or helpless. And kasal is laziness. Wal-bukhli wal-jubn. Al-bukhl, it is miserliness and stinginess or being greedy. Wal-jubn is cowardice. Wa ghalabati ad-dayn, being overwhelmed with debt. Wa qahri rijal, and being overpowered by other men. Now if you notice something here, the majority of the things that the Prophet ﷺ taught Abu Umama to say, to ask Allah to protect him from, they are mental illnesses, anxiety, depression, feeling helpless, right? Even laziness. And it's caused by these matters that I mentioned at the end. Being overwhelmed with debt, it causes anxiety, it causes depression, and being overpowered by other men. It makes you feel helpless, and it causes cowardice, and so on, right? And stinginess, etc. So the Prophet ﷺ taught him to say that every day, without fail. He said that's the prescription. You have to say it every morning. Abu Umama, he started doing it. A few days later, Abu Umama came back to the Prophet ﷺ extremely jolly. He said, Ya Rasulullah, he wants to tell me information. The Prophet ﷺ sees him and he's thinking, what's the matter, Ya Abu Umama? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I have good news. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has paid off my debt, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala got rid of my sadness and my grief and my depression and so on by making that dua every day.
Rather, failure, it is in us not making dua. We say, are you only telling us to make dua? How much dua do you make? How much dua do you dedicate to your fellow Muslims who are suffering? You see all these pictures, these images, these videos. How much do you ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to aid them? How much do you ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala with certainty to grant them assistance? How much do you turn back to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala? How much do you call upon Allah Azza wa Jal? How many hours of the day do you dedicate to making dua for them? Stop talking about the ability that we do not have. We keep talking about the ability that we do not possess. But that which we do possess, that Allah has granted us the ability to do, we fall short in doing it.
Those who have Iman, they have certainty in that. Rather, that only increases Sahaba and Iman. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, Allah Azza describes them.
وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ قَالُوا هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا.
Allah says, when the believers, they saw the Sahaba, when they saw the Ahzab, the confederates, all these armies, they saw them. They saw these men who have come to kill them. They said, this is what Allah and His Messenger ﷺ have promised us. And Allah and His Messenger ﷺ have spoken the truth. What are they referring to? And Allah said, and they did not increase them except in faith and submission. They saw this, they became firmer, they became more steadfast, they had more faith in the promise of Allah, they had more faith in the victory of Allah, they had more faith that they're going to be successful. What is the promise of Allah that they're referring to in the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam? Allah Azza wa Jalla says,
أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب.
Allah says, do you think that you're going to enter paradise and you're not going to be tested like those who came before you? They were afflicted with adversities and hardships and calamities, and they were shaken until the messenger and those who believed with him, they said, where is the victory of Allah? That's how tough it got. They couldn't bear it anymore. Verily the victory of Allah, it is near. That is the promise of Allah and the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, that they had certainty in the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. They saw this and they realized that we are going to be tested, but this is part of the promise of Allah. For us to get to the victory, we have to go through hardship. For us to get to the victory, we have to face difficulty. For us to get to the victory, our faith is going to be tested. For us to get to the victory, we have to be shaken. For us to get to the victory, our faith is going to be tested to see if we're going to pass the test, so that we strive and earn that reward of Allah. That was the reaction of the believers.